Hey, Mr. O'Connell, this is my fourth quarter project on the murder of Emmett Till in 1955. Before I start this project, I want to let you know that this project is going to be informal. And not informal in the sense that it's not going to teach you anything. It's going to teach you a lot, in fact. Just informal in the sense that I'm not going to sound like a robot who's reading letters or words off a piece of paper. I'm actually going to be engaging with you and talking to you and giving my own ideas on this case. Obviously, I'm gonna read stuff to you that's formal, but I'm also gonna derive a little bit away from my script. The murder of Emmett Till, 1955. Emmett Till's story was like that of many sorrowful stories in which highlights the gruesome reality that many African Americans underwent. But the key of Emmett's story that distinguishes his own from other African American stories was his brutal and vile death. Emmett Till was an African American boy who was brutally murdered at the age of 14 for allegedly making flirtatious advances towards a white woman. Those who murdered him were the husband of the woman who was suspected to be the target of Till's advances and the woman's brother-in-law. This man, the second murderer, is also the half-brother of the woman's husband. According to an article written on History.com, they ordered him to carry a 75-pound cotton gin fan to a river named Tallahatchie. When they arrived to Tallahatchie, they gave him another order. This time, they forced him to take off his clothes. It was then after he took off his clothes, they attacked and eventually killed him. In the same article, it states, the two men beat him nearly to death, gouged at his eye, shot him in the head, and threw his body into the river while it was attached to the cotton gin fan using barbed wire. It's truly heartbreaking to know these facts because this indicates to me that he was probably alive when they gouged out his eye, which furthermore illustrates the pain and the gruesome reality of what this boy truly faced. Before we further progress into the detail of this poor boy's tragic story, it is best we examine his life before death so we as the listeners of history can really receive the best interpretation of what his death signified. Before his gruesome death, Emmett Till, like stated before, was born in Chicago, Illinois. And in case I didn't state this, he was actually born in the South Side. It was there where he was born into a working-class family in a working-class neighborhood. His mother was a woman named Mammy Carthen Till Mobley, who was an American educator and who became an activist after the death of Emmett. His father was Louis Till, who has a sad story himself. He was an American soldier who was given the capital punishment for murder and rape. Growing up, Till, who despite attending segregated elementary school, he was not ready for segregation he would ultimately face in Mississippi. Let me elaborate. What this means is that despite him already dealing with segregation as a youngster, as a child, as a kid of like say 8 years old, he would never have fully prepared for the segregation he would face in Mississippi, a more southern state, a more white predominant state. It was then during this time of learning, during this time of elementary school, where his mom gave him his first lesson. This is possibly the lesson that could have saved his life. She wanted him to take care of himself. She wanted him to take care of himself because of his race, and she knew that he was vulnerable to white attacks. But being the youngster he was, he couldn't abide by these lessons and pulled pranks often. One can say that it was his pranks that subliminally killed him. This ideology was proved through him asking a white woman out on a date. One day he was with his cousin and his friends outside a store. Being the kid he was and the jokester he was, he began joking to his group about the white girlfriend he had back home. With his friends disbelieving him, they dared him to ask the white woman behind the store counter for a date. So he went to the store, bought some candy, and on the way out yelled, "Bye, baby." And if you followed my video thus far, I'm pretty sure you know what happens from there. But in case you haven't, allow me to elaborate once more. There was no witnesses in the store but a woman named Bryant, the woman behind the counter. She claims Emmett grabbed her and made sexual advances towards her. Roy Bryant, the husband of the store clerk, became enraged when he returned home from a business trip to hear the news. Roy then went out looking for blood with his brother J.W. Willem. He went to Emmett's great-uncle's house, Mo's right, to get Emmett. Emmett's great-uncle pleaded with the two men to see Emmett, but this was denied. According to Jim Blazin's report of the death of Emmett, titled "A Crime That's So Unjust," Chris Crow tells about the death of Emmett Till. Mose recalls in an interview that Caroline's husband, Roy Bryant, and his half-brother kidnapped Emmett, and he was never seen alive again. After they forced Emmett into their car, they drove him to Tallahatchie River, where he was eventually killed. 3 days later, his corpse was discovered so badly mutilated that Emmett's great-uncle Mose could only identify the body through an initial ring. Authorities called for the quick burial of the body, but Emmett's mother, Mammy, requested to be sent back to Chicago. Despite having a mutilated face, Emmett's mother asked that his ceremony, his burial, be an open casket. She wanted her son's death not to be done so in vain. She wanted the world to see what those murderers did to her son. Jet, an African-American news magazine, took a picture of Emmett's face during his funeral, and from there on, it exploded on all media outlets. After his funeral, it took less than 2 weeks to put his murderers, Millum and Bryant, on trial. The trial took place in a segregated courthouse in Sumner, Mississippi. Emmett's great-uncle witnessed the trial as he was the only one who could identify the killers. On September 23rd, in a trial that happened in less than an hour, an all-white jury came to the conclusion that Emmett's killers were not guilty. The reasoning behind the verdict was that the state was incapable of identifying Emmett's body. They were also acquitted of a separate charge in which involved the possible kidnapping of Emmett. Decades later, in 2017, Caroline Bryant, the woman who was supposedly the target of Emmett's advances, came out in a book and basically saying that nothing happened. It was all a lie. In the book, The Blood of Emmett Till, written by Tim Tyson, it was real that Caroline admitted that nothing ever happened. She says in the book that Till had never made any gestures towards her, harassed her, or even threatened her in the slightest. She states specifically, nothing that boy ever did could ever justify what happened to him. The ironic thing about Emmett's story was that he was just a kid doing harmless things. He meant no harm to the white woman. He couldn't have possibly anticipated the effect of him saying "bye, baby" to a white woman would have on the world. According to the document titled "The Lynching of Emmett Till" by Chris Crow, Emmett was a civil rights activist. He wasn't politically active. He didn't go to Mississippi to change the Jim Crow culture. But the national media attention surrounding his death and the trial, and the acquittal of his alleged murderers, had an impact that no one can ever imagine. The Emmett Till case became one of the key incidents of 1955, in which was the explosive year that launched the modern civil rights movement. The story of Emmett symbolizes the story of many African Americans who go unheard. Although it's now public, it's important that we as Americans and we as citizens and we as the young generation keep in mind all of these past events so history doesn't repeat itself, even though it's unlikely that something like this will ever happen again. It's up to us to educate ourselves in a society that shuns this away, that acts like it never happened. Talking to you, Mr. O'Connell, I appreciate you deeply for having the teaching style that teaches us of all the gruesome past, even the stuff that's not meant to be for kids like me. Yeah, this is my fourth quarter project. I hope you like it.